The voice was a shard of glass through the tranquil Saturday morning. "Hey, you can't park there. That spot's reserved for residents." It was loud, sharp, and crackling with a sense of authority that was both absolute and entirely misplaced. The peace of Willow Creek, a neighborhood where the most significant weekend event was usually the firing up of a lawnmower, shattered in an instant. Inside the modest sedan, Judge Marcus Reed flinched, the soothing chords of Vivaldi concerto still whispering in his earbuds. He had just returned from his morning ritual, a 5-mile jog along the river path followed by a stop at the Daily Grind, where he enjoyed a black coffee and the anonymity of being just another middle-aged man in a faded gray hoodie and well-worn running shoes. Nothing about his appearance hinted at the weighty decisions he presided over from the federal bench. He was, for these precious weekend hours, unremarkable. He had, in fact, just pulled into his assigned parking spot, the one clearly marked with a pristine white stenciled 42B. It was a small victory, a signal that his day of quiet reading and pottering about his new condo could begin. But before his key could even twist in the ignition, the storm arrived. Her name was Karen, though the residents of Willow Creek often referred to her in hushed, exasperated tones as the Commissioner. She was a woman forged in the fires of homeowner association bylaws, her weapon of choice a weathered clipboard bristling with violation slips. She stormed across the asphalt, her sensible sandals slapping a rhythm of pure indignation. "I said you can't park there," she yelled, her voice cutting through the birdsong. She didn't just tap on his window. She rapped on it with the edge of her clipboard, a sharp, percussive bang that made the glass tremble. "This spot belongs to a homeowner, not guests. Read the sign." Marcus, his heart rate only just settling for his run, took a deliberate breath. He had mediated disputes between multinational corporations and parsed the most complex constitutional arguments, but he knew this required a different kind of patience. He rolled down the window slowly, the electric motor whirring, the humid morning air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, flooded in. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, calm counterpoint to her shrillness. "This is my spot. I live here." Karen's eyes, magnified behind large-frame glasses, swept over him with dismissive efficiency. She took in the hoodie, the sweat-damp hair, the lack of any signifier of established wealth. She folded her arms, the clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. "Oh, please," she scoffed, the words dripping with condescension. "I've lived here for 12 years. I know everyone in this complex, and I've never seen you before. So don't you lie to me." There was an edge to her tone now, something uglier than simple annoyance, a presumption of guilt. Marcus remained a rock in her churning stream. "I moved in last month. Unit 42B. He gestured vaguely toward the building. The corner unit on the 4th floor. A sneer twisted Karen's lips. It was a practiced expression, one reserved for delivery drivers who took too long and neighbors who dare to fly unapproved flags. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England," she retorted, her voice rising to a theatrical pitch, ensuring she had an audience. "Now move your car, or I will call security and have you towed. We have rules here." It was then that Marcus became aware of the shifting atmosphere around them. The confrontation was no longer a private one. A few doors creaked open. Figures stepped out onto their balconies, drawn by the commotion. Up on the 3rd floor, an elderly man in a bathrobe sipped his coffee, watching with keen interest. From another balcony, a young couple leaned over the railing, and in the hands of several onlookers, phones were being quietly, discreetly raised, their cameras activated, transforming the sunny parking lot into an impromptu stage for a very public undoing. The quiet judge and the queen of the HOA were now the main event. The initial shock of being challenged began to curdle into something more potent for Karen, righteous fury. This man, this nobody in a sweat-stained hoodie, wasn't just violating a rule. He was challenging her entire worldview, a world neatly ordered by covenants and restrictions. "You know what? I'm calling the HOA right now," she declared, her voice scaling new heights of drama. She yanked her phone from her pocket, holding it aloft as if it were a scepter of officialdom. Her eyes never left his, daring him to flinch. "You renters think you can just move in and do whatever you want. You have no respect for property values or community standards. Marcus remained a study in stillness. He leaned a casual elbow against his car doorframe, the picture of weary patience. Actually, ma'am, he corrected, his tone even and factual. I own this unit. The correction was like gasoline on her smoldering indignation. Ha! The sound was a sharp, humorless bark. Sure you do. I'll have you know I am on the HOA board. I review every single closing document. I would have known. She took a step closer, invading his personal space, her finger jabbing the air for emphasis. Now, why don't you stop this charade and tell me whose car this really is? Are you a handyman? A delivery driver who got lost? He met her gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but one of profound fatigue. It's registered under my name, Marcus Reed. The name, delivered with such simple finality, seemed to hang in the air for a moment, but Karen batted it away. Don't you get smart with me, she seethed, her cheeks flushing. I'm documenting this. This is a formal complaint. She raised her phone again, but this time was a camera. The shutter clicked loudly in the morning quiet as she took photos of his license plate, a close-up of his slightly dusty bumper, and then, brazenly, she angled the lens directly at his face. The violation of privacy was audacious, a power play for the growing audience. That's when the equilibrium shifted. Tom, a retired history teacher from 38C who often enjoyed his morning paper on his balcony, had seen and heard enough. He ambled over, his kind, wrinkled face etched with concern. Karen, for heaven's sake, leave the man alone, he said, his voice a gentle but firm rumble. Karen whirled on him. Tom, this does not concern you. This is an HOA matter. It concerns all of us when you harass a neighbor, Tom replied calmly. He gestured toward Marcus. That's Judge Reed. He just bought 42B from the Henderson estate. Paid cash, I heard. He looked back at Karen, his meaning clear. Really nice guy. You might want to step back. The word judge landed like a physical blow. Karen's rigid posture faltered. The clipboard, held so fiercely moments before, dipped slightly. Judge, she repeated, her voice losing its strident edge, replaced by a wobble of uncertainty. Her mind was clearly racing, scrambling to recategorize a man in the hoodie. But for a personality built on the bedrock of never being wrong, retreat was not an option. The public humiliation was a poison more potent than the truth. Her spine stiffened anew. I don't care if he's the President of the United States, she snapped, the bravado returning, though it now sounded brittle and forced. He still can't just park wherever he... Marcus finally moved. He didn't step forward, but he straightened up, and the simple adjustment carried a sudden, unconscious weight. The easy slouch of the jogger vanished, replaced by a posture of command. His voice, when he spoke, was still quiet, but it was no longer suggestion. It was a verdict. Ma'am, he interrupted, the single word slicing through her tirade. I think it's best you stop talking now, before you say something you'll profoundly regret. The calm, judicial finality in his tone was the one thing her bluster couldn't withstand. It didn't make her compliant. It made her reckless. Oh, you're threatening me now, she shrilled, projecting her voice to every balcony, every open window, ensuring the entire neighborhood witnessed her martyrdom. A judge threatening a homeowner. That's it. I'm done. I'm calling the police. She stabbed at her phone, her fingers trembling with a toxic cocktail of fury and dawning, unacknowledged terror. The performance had reached its climax, and there was no backing down. The wail of sirens cut through suburban calm, growing rapidly louder until two pristine patrol cars swung into the Willow Creek parking lot, their light bars painting the stucco walls in frantic pulses of blue and red. It was a level of escalation the quiet morning had never seen. Karen, seeing her reinforcement arrive, practically launched herself toward them, a study in manufactured victimhood. Officers, thank goodness you're here, she cried, her voice a masterclass in performative distress. She pointed a trembling finger toward Marcus, who hadn't moved from his placid stance beside his car. This man is trespassing, refusing to leave a reserved spot, and he just threatened me. I felt genuinely unsafe. The two officers, a seasoned veteran named Evans and his younger partner, Ramirez, exchanged a brief, knowing glance. They had dealt with Karen types before. Officer Evans, a man with a calm demeanor forged from 2 decades on the force, approached Marcus. His partner moved to gently intercept Karen, whose torrent of words showed no sign of abating. "Sir, we've had a complaint." Officer Evans began, his tone neutral and professional. "Can I get your name and see some identification, please?" "Of course, officer," Marcus said, his voice polite and cooperative. He reached slowly into the car, retrieved his wallet, and handed over his driver's license. "My name is Marcus Reed." The officer's eyes scanned the license, then flicked up to Marcus's face, then back down. A slow dawning of recognition spread across his features. He blinked, his professional composure cracking for just a second. "Judge Marcus Reed?" he asked, his voice dropping into a register of newfound respect. "From the federal district court?" From a few feet away, Karen's ongoing monologue to Officer Ramirez stuttered to a halt. "Wait, what?" The word was a small, choked sound. Her clipboard, which had been her shield and sword, hung limply at her side. Officer Evans nodded, his posture instinctively straightening as if he were standing before the bench. He looked over at Karen, his expression now a mixture of pity and sternness. "Yes, ma'am. Judge Reed is one of the most respected federal judges in this district. I've testified in his courtroom on multiple occasions." He handed the license back to Marcus with a slight, almost imperceptible nod of deference. "Your Honor." The color drained from Karen's face, so completely it was as if someone had pulled a plug. The bluster, the self-righteous fury, everything evaporated, leaving behind a pale, trembling shell. "Oh, I didn't know," she stammered, her eyes wide with a horror that was finally blessedly genuine. Officer Evans turned fully to face her, his arms now crossed. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm and carrying, ensuring the gathered neighbors could hear the official rebuke. "Are you aware that you just summoned 2 police units to falsely accuse a federal official of trespassing on his own property?" "I didn't mean to, it's just he looked." Karen floundered, her mind scrambling for any scrap of justification. "He looked suspicious." Marcus, who had been observing the scene with detached interest, finally spoke again. He took a single, calm step forward, and in that moment, he was no longer the man in the hoodie. He was every inch the jurist. He tilted his head, his gaze sharp and focused. "Suspicious how?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted from the judge to the officers to the ring of watching neighbors. The silence was profound, a vacuum waiting to be filled with the ugly, unspoken truth she had been operating on all along. Everyone knew what she wanted to say, what his hoodie, his car, and perhaps the color of his skin had whispered to her prejudiced mind. But even in her utter humiliation, a final, flickering instinct for self-preservation told her that giving voice to it would be a catastrophe far greater than this one. Officer Ramirez, seeing her struggle, stepped in. "Ma'am, you have no legal right to harass or film your fellow residents without their consent," he said firmly. "And you certainly cannot misuse emergency services every time you make an assumption about who does or does not belong here. This is an official warning." A strangled, "I'm sorry," squeaked out of Karen, but it was lost in the rustle of the wind and the low murmur of the crowd. It was too late. The performance was over. The curtain had fallen, revealing not a wrong queen, but a petty tyrant who had been publicly, utterly, and irrevocably dethroned in the middle of the sunny Saturday parking lot. The crisp, official envelope from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association felt different in Karen's hands. This wasn't one of the violation notices she took such pleasure in distributing. It was addressed to her, and the weight of it felt foreboding. A few days had passed since the parking lot debacle, a period she had spent in a state of furious, self-pitying isolation, convinced the entire neighborhood was unfairly persecuting her. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the formal language. It was from the HOA president, a soft-spoken architect named David Chun, whom she'd always considered too lenient. The letter cited specific bylaws, but it was the opening paragraph that turned her blood to ice. It referenced the incident of Saturday the 14th, which has been widely documented on social media and has brought significant negative attention to the Willow Creek community. A cold dread seized her. She fumbled for her tablet, her fingers clumsy as she typed in the keywords. The video appeared instantly. There she was, in high definition, her face contorted in a sneer, her voice shrill as she banged on the car window. The angle was from a third-floor balcony, perfectly capturing her entire performance. The title made her gasp. HOA Karen attacks black homeowner. Instantly regrets it. The view count was staggering, well over 1 million, and the comments section was a torrent of condemnation. The letter's verdict was swift and merciless. Due to her egregious behavior, which constitutes harassment and a gross misuse of HOA authority, and for bringing public embarrassment and disrepute to the Willow Creek community, she was hereby removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. Furthermore, she was being fined for harassment and the cost of the unnecessary police response. She tried to appeal, of course. She called an emergency meeting, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. She argued it was a misunderstanding, that she was only trying to uphold the rules. But her reign of petty tyranny had left her with no allies. One by one, her neighbors stood and testified. The young couple from 21C spoke of her constant nitpicking about their patio furniture. The elderly man from 38C, Tom, calmly recounted the entire parking lot incident, confirming the judge's calm demeanor and her own escalating belligerence. The wall of her self-justification crumbled under the weight of their collective truth. Meanwhile, a different letter arrived at Unit 42B. It was a formal, heartfelt apology on behalf of the entire HOA board, signed by David Chun and every member except Karen. They condemned her actions unequivocally and extended an invitation for Judge Reed to speak at their next community meeting about fostering diversity and respect in our community. The night of the meeting, the community room was packed. A palpable tension filled the air as Marcus Reed walked in, not in a hoodie, but in a simple, well-tailored blazer. He carried no notes. He saw Karen immediately, hunched in a chair in the back row, trying to make herself invisible, her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. When it was his turn to speak, he stood with a quiet authority that required no gavel. He spoke of community, of the shared responsibility of neighbors. His voice was calm, measured, and carried to every corner of the silent room. Then, his gaze found Karen in the back. He didn't point or name her, but he looked directly at her, his eyes holding a weight that felt like a judgment. Respect, he said, the word clear and sharp in the quiet, isn't something you demand with a clipboard or a title. It's not a weapon to be wielded against those you deem beneath you. He paused, letting the words sink in. It's something you show to everyone, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or what they do for a living. It is the absolute baseline of any civilized society. The room erupted in a wave of sustained, heartfelt applause. People nodded. Some looked at their hands in introspection. Karen, however, did not look up. She kept her head down, a solitary island of shame in a sea of agreement. The thunderous sound feeling less like applause for him and more like a condemnation of everything she had ever represented. The seasons turned in Willow Creek. The fierce summer sun softened into the gentle gold of autumn, and with it, the neighborhood seemed to exhale a breath it had been holding for years. The change was subtle but profound. The perpetual, low-grade anxiety that came with Karen's watchful presence had dissipated. Residents lingered on their patios without the fear of a citation for an unapproved flower pot. Children's chalk drawings decorated the sidewalks without being immediately reported as defacement of common property. The community, once policed, was now simply lived in. Judge Marcus Reed observed this quiet transformation from his fourth-floor balcony, a cup of evening tea in hand. He had settled into the rhythm of his new home, his morning jogs and weekend routines now uninterrupted. He was known, not as the man from the viral video, but as a quiet, polite neighbor who happened to wear a robe to work. One such evening, as he returned from a long day at the courthouse, the sky was painted in shades of violet and orange. As he walked from his car, parked unchallenged in 42B, he saw her. Karen was on her knees in a small garden plot by her front door, meticulously watering a cluster of purple asters. She saw him, and her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. For months, their paths had crossed only in fleeting, awkward moments where she would quickly look away. But tonight was different. She set down her watering can, wiped her hands on her jeans, and, after a visible internal struggle, walked toward him. She stopped a respectful distance away, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Judge Reed," she began, her voice softer and more hesitant than he had ever heard it. She couldn't quite meet his eyes, focusing instead on a point somewhere near his shoulder. I wanted to apologize for everything." She took a shaky breath. "The way I treated you was unacceptable. I was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." The words hung in the cool evening air, stripped of the performative drama of her previous apology attempt in the community room. This felt raw, unscripted, and deeply personal. Marcus studied her for a moment. The defiant queen was gone, replaced by a chastened, embarrassed woman. He gave a small, genuine smile, one that held no triumph, only a quiet acknowledgement. "Thank you, Karen," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "Apology accepted." He paused and added gently, "I just hope you treat the next person you meet, whoever they are, whatever they look like, with more respect than you treated me." A flush of shame crept up her neck, but she nodded, the gesture one of sincere understanding rather than defeated pride. "I will," she murmured. "I am trying." As Marcus turned and walked toward his building, a thought occurred to him, carrying with it a profound sense of irony. Here was a woman who had tried so desperately to police a space, to enforce her narrow version of order, who had seen a man and deemed him an outsider in his own home. And in the end, the ultimate authority, not his title, but his character, had been the very thing to teach her the lesson she so desperately needed. She had tried to intimidate a judge, and instead, she had been judged by her own actions, with the entire world as her jury. From that day forward, the change in Karen was not just noticeable, it was transformative. She submitted her formal, irrevocable resignation from all HOA activities. The clipboard vanished. Soon after, she began volunteering at the local community center, organizing food drives and reading to children. It was, neighbors whispered, an attempt to repair her shattered public image, but some who spoke with her saw a deeper change, a flicker of a conscience, long dormant, finally stirring awake. And Judge Reed? He continued his quiet life. In the courtroom, he was known for his sharp intellect and unwavering fairness. But in Willow Creek, he was known as something more, the man who had met ignorance not with fury, but with an unshakable patience, and in doing so, had not only defended his own dignity, but had, perhaps, helped a lost soul find a fragment of hers.